In late 19th century England, a creative young engaged couple were trying to find their future home in the countryside. John was a painter and Laura a writer, both of them earning small amounts but not enough for a city lifestyle. They had searched for months for a place that was both livable and picturesque, but without success. Finally, on their honeymoon, they discovered a charming stone cottage outside the small village of Brenzett, also with cheap rent. The romantic flower-covered dwelling had obviously been part of a larger structure now long gone. The couple set up house there and were soon busily pursuing their crafts in their new idyllic location. John painting the rustic scenery and Laura writing poems about it. They also hired a local woman called Mrs. Dorman to be their housekeeper. As well as cooking meals and gardening, she also told them about the local folklore, stories of not only smugglers and highwaymen, but also the spectres that stalked nearby glens. 3 months into their happy new life, John arrived home one night after a visit to the local doctor to find Laura distraught and crying. Mrs. Dorman had told her that she needed to leave before the end of the month. The reason she had given was that her niece was ill. However, Laura said her niece was always ill, so that this was just an excuse. Laura had wondered if someone had turned her against them, as her manner had been so strange when she delivered the news. In that case, it would probably be difficult to hire anyone in the village, and she and John would be so busy attending to everyday tasks that they would have no time for their work. John immediately said that he would talk with Mrs. Dorman when she returned, and that perhaps she wanted a raise of earnings. He suggested a walk to cheer them up to their favourite place, which was the village church. The local Norman-era church, as well as being historic, was surrounded by tranquil gardens. Inside, arches surrounded the stained-glassed windows, and on each side of the altar lay 2 massive tombs of ancient knights. Each had a grey marble full-length carving of the nameless knight in full plate armour and lying on a low slab, its hands held up in prayer. Strangely, the figures could always be seen, even if there was barely a glimmer of light in the church. Local legend described the men as fierce and wicked marauders by land and sea, the scourge of their time, and guilty of deeds so foul that the house they had lived in had been struck by lightning. John and Laura had found out only recently that this house had stood on the site of their cottage. The reason for the religious tribute to the knights was that the gold of their heirs had bought them their place in the church. Looking at the hard, nasty faces reproduced in the marble, this story was easily believed. On their return from the walk, John and Laura found that Mrs. Dorman had come to cook supper, and John immediately asked her about her intention to leave. She had found the couple kindly and was happy with the amount she was earning, but still adamant that she needed to be gone by Thursday, in 3 days. After further conversation, she made the strange statement that she may be able to return next week. Now convinced that she simply wanted a holiday, John pressed her further as to why she needed to go this week. Mrs. Dorman's manner became guarded as she explained that the couple's house used to be much bigger and that there were many deeds done there. She was suddenly talking about the effigies of the knights in armour that they had just seen in the church, the life-size marble sculptures. She explained that on All Saints' Eve, the 2 bodies sit bolt upright on their slabs, get down from them, and then walk down the aisle. Then, as the church clock strikes 11, they walk out of the church door and over the graves and down the path where the coffins are carried. If it's a wet night, she claimed, the marks of their feet can be seen there in the morning. Asked where do they go, she said ominously, back here to their home, that this place where John and Laura were living is where they come, and if anyone meets them, Mrs. Dorman could not continue, seemingly overwhelmed with dread. She finished with a warning that they must lock the door early on All Saints' Eve and make the cross sign over the doorstep and on the windows. The last occupant of the cottage, she added, used to travel to London a full month before the night. John decided not to tell Laura the bizarre legend of the marble spectres. The couple managed well with their housekeeping duties and looked forward to Mrs. Dorman's return the following week. They got through Thursday and on Friday set out for another walk. However, Laura was shivering on their return, although it was not cold. She was very quiet, saying that she was feeling uneasy and hinting that she was having some kind of presentiment of evil. She compared the feeling with one she had experienced the night her father passed away, even though he was in the north of Scotland. Soon cheering up, the pair played the piano and sang together for a couple of very happy hours. Finally, Laura gave John an ecstatic hug and said that she would sit by the fire for a while. He was then ready for his evening pipe, and not wishing to cause Laura any further discomfort, he decided to smoke outside. Stepping out to the garden, he strolled around there for some time, always marvelling to himself how happy he and Laura were together. Enjoying the silence of nature, he noticed a strange grey light created in the frost and moon's rays. Hearing the church bell strike 11, he decided to again walk towards their favourite spot before retiring for the night. Through the window, he could see Laura reclined and probably asleep before the fire as he set off towards the wood. On his way through the trees, John was sure he heard heavy footsteps nearby. Whenever he stopped, they stopped. He assumed they belonged to a poacher, but one without the sense to tread a bit more lightly. On arriving at the church, he saw that its door was open and felt a little guilty that he had left it unlatched the other day on their walk. He was halfway up the church aisle when he remembered with a sudden chill that this was the very day and hour when, according to tradition, the marble knights began to walk. With a slight shiver, he continued walking, thinking that he could later reassure Mrs. Dorman that the stone figures remained perfectly in place. The back of the church and the arches above the two tombs seemed much larger, and when the moon came out, he realised why. He stopped short, almost choking with the shock, as his heart sank sickeningly. The enormous effigies were gone, their wide marble slabs lying blank and bare in the glaring moonlight. In a frenzy, John ran his hands over the smooth slabs, wondering if someone had taken the sculptures in some kind of sick joke. Finally lighting a match to check that the figures were indeed gone. He was seized by an overwhelming horror as he ran from the church and through its graveyard, cutting across the fields to head for home. It was here that he was intercepted by the local doctor, who laughed at the reason for his haste, his garbled reference to the local superstition, and the fact that the marble figures were gone. The doctor insisted on walking back to the church, where John was relieved to see that the two massive figures again lay in repose on their tombs. He explained away his sighting as some trick of light and invited the doctor back to the cottage for a drink. Meanwhile, the doctor had lit a match and was examining one statue. He remarked that something strange had happened there, as one knight's hand was broken. Perhaps someone had tried to remove them. At the cottage, the pair found all the doors and windows wide open, and the parlour ablaze with candles, Laura's known remedy for her own nervousness. But her chair was empty, and Laura finally found collapsed and lifeless in the recess of the window, her eyes still wide open in terror. What had they last seen? In shock and devastated, John held his beloved wife's body as the doctor prized open her tightly clenched hand to see what it was holding. It was a grey marble finger.